Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. In today's card, I'm doing a window with a front and back cat, and he's looking in on the fishbowl. So I'm going to be using this My Favorite Things Cool Cat stamp set. It has a lot of cute cats and sentiments. I'm going to be using this fishbowl, and then I've got the front and back of the cat. And I'm also using this Penny Black cling stamp with the brick pattern. And I've got the Hearth and Home die set by Stampin' Up. I'm going to start by stamping all of my stamps at the same time. I'm using Memento Tuxedo Black ink and some Neenah Solar White cardstock. So I'm going to stamp them down. I'm using this ink because it's best with Copic markers. And now I'll start working on my coloring. I'm going to use Y21 and YR24. So the first thing I'm going to do is cover the head. I like to work piece by piece. So I'm just going to do one part at a time. So I'll cover the head with Y21. I'll take an acrylic block and put some YR24, and the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't have a color that's in between these two colors. I'm actually going to be doing my stripes with the YR24, so I don't want to do the shading with that same color or you won't be able to see the stripes. So to get a color in between, you can take your light color, pick up some of the dark color with your light colored tip, and then color along the edge. So you could see I get some of that R24 when I first hit the paper, and then as I continue coloring, the YR24 kind of goes away off the Y21 tip. And you can always color on the side there to get more of it off if it needs to be a little lighter. I'm going to continue on with the body doing the same exact thing, so I'm covering the whole thing with my Y21. And then I'll pull some R24 off the acrylic block with my Y21 marker and just apply it in the darker shadow areas and pull it out toward the back of the cat. This technique is giving me just some really subtle shading, but that's what I'm looking for. I'm going to let this dry a little bit before I apply my stripes, and that's because I don't want the stripes to blend into the rest of him. So I'm going to work on some other pieces here. I've got his head going, and I'm using the same technique, Y21 all over, and then I'll pick up some YR24 from the acrylic block and apply it to my shadow areas. For the insides of his ears, I just grabbed an E51 and colored that in. After letting that dry for a few minutes, I'm going to start the stripes. I'm using the YR24, which is the color I started with, the darker color. And I'm just going over there are some stripes already as part of the stamp, and I'm just going to color over those. And then I'm also going to create some new stripes on the side here. They're going to come in wide and then to a tip. So I'm going to kind of pull them in toward the back. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going back and forth a couple of times just because I want to make sure that they're even on both sides. And for the body, the same exact thing. Here there's a lot of stripes already as part of the stamp, so for the body I'm just going to go over those stripes that are already there. I'm going to create those same stripes on the front of the kitty face, and I found that the whiskers were a good measure for doing that bottom stripe, so I just did the bottom stripe on top of those whiskers. I'm going to add a little more depth to the stripes of the cat by adding E99. It's just like a dark orangey brown. And I'm going to put a little dot at the base of all these stripes. And all I need is just a tiny little bit of dark color there, because too much will just be too much contrast. And I'm taking my YR24, I'm just blending that little dot out. And what that's doing is making it look like his head is a little bit more rounder by providing some shadow right on the edge. So I'm just putting that color right at the very tip. It's not quite as noticeable on the other stripes that already have stripes in the stamp, but I'm going to do it anyway just to make sure that everything is consistent. Just add a little dot and then take the YR24 and blend it out. And then of course I'll do the same exact thing on the front face of the cat. The cat and the fishbowl are really the only sources of color for this card, so I'm going to tie these two elements together by taking the blue that I'm using for the water in the fishbowl and using it on the collar of the cat. And then I'll color the fishbowl. This is B02. It's just kind of a nice, pretty light, but sort of bright blue. And I'm going to color the edges of the fishbowl water. And then I'll take my B000, and that's the lightest blue I have. I don't have B00, which may work better, I'm not sure. But I'm just going to blend that out until I meet in the middle. Whenever I have something that's white or glass, I always use a C1, which is a cool gray. It's the lightest gray, and a 0. So I'm going to color the left and right sides with the C1, And then I'll take my 0 marker, which is a colorless blender, and I'll just blend that out just so I don't have a line of C1. And I decided to go and color the ridge right there of the bowl with the C1. For the sand, I'm just going to color a really quick E55. And the fish is also just a single color, YR04. It's just a bright orange. And I'm trying to be careful not to get in anywhere near the blue because then they will blend together because I didn't give it enough time to dry. So if you want to make sure your colors don't start bleeding into one another, you can let them dry first. There are dies that come with this set. I don't have them, so I'm just going to cut this out by hand. I know it can be kind of a dilemma what to do when you're cutting out whiskers and hair and things like that. So what I normally do is I just cut around them, and then once it's finished, I'm cutting a triangle out of it. So I'm cutting diagonal from the bottom whisker, diagonal from the medium whisker to meet in the middle so a triangle pops out. And so I did that on each one of these whiskers, the front and the back. I wanted to pause here and show you that I use these alcohol swabs from the grocery store to clean off my acrylic block. So I use it mostly to clean off the Copic markers because they're alcohol based, but you can also use these alcohol wipes to fully clean your acrylic blocks, and it gets off a lot of like the sticky adhesive that ends up on your block, and it really makes them nice and shiny. When I'm done with the alcohol, I just wipe it like I wipe a stamp clean with my absorber. For the background of the card, I'm going to stamp directly to the card base. I'm using Simon Says Stamp Fog ink on this penny black brick pattern. And this fog ink is my new favorite background color because it is so pretty and it's really subtle and it really just blends in. A lot of times I want a gray background, but the gray is too dark. This is just the perfect shade. You can see I'm doing this upside down just because it's easier for me to see where I'm stamping. I'm going to keep my background really subtle because I want my fish and cat to stand out. So I'm going to use the fog cardstock, which matches the fog ink, to die cut my window. So I'm going to cut one out of the fog and one out of the Nina. The fog window is going to go on the outside, so I'm going to position it in the center, and then I'm going to mark with a pencil the inside of the window. I need to cut a hole in the front of my card so that I can see through the window, and these pencil marks will guide me in my trimmer. I'm going to use a trimmer that allows me to cut from the inside of the cardstock so I can position my blade wherever I want it. And I'm going to cut just on the outside of those pencil marks so I have plenty of room to glue the window to both the inside and the outside. So I'm going to turn this, and I'm going to use those horizontal lines on my trimmer to line up my card, and then I'll start my blade in the middle, then I'll go up, and then I'll go down until I get to the outside of, just outside, maybe like 1/8 of an inch outside those pencil marks. So you can see how the middle will just pop out when I'm finished. And when I put my window on top and flip it over, you can see that I could barely see just enough fog on the other side. I'm going to put some Tombow Mono multi-glue on the back side of this fog piece. I accidentally put some on the crossbars. That was a mistake because there's nothing to adhere to yet, but I'm not going to worry about that. And then I'll put that same glue on the back side of the white window, and this time definitely the crossbars. And then I will put that on the inside of the card. That way I have something that looks nice on the inside of the card. You want to make sure you don't use too much glue because this glue is sticky when it dries and you don't want your card to stick together. All right, so now my window is finished and I can start putting the pieces on. First is the cat back, so I'm going to put a little bit on his body, not his head yet, and I'll place him looking into the window. I want my sentiment to be hidden while the card is closed, so I'm going to draw a guide around the cat's head. And I'll also mark the bottom of the window and draw a line across with a ruler so I have a completely enclosed area where I know I need to put my sentiment, because I do want it to be even with the fishbowl. I'm using this You Are Set by Altenew. It has a never give up sentiment in it. I use this sentiment set all the time, so if you're looking for a set to use that has some very versatile sentiments, this is a great one. I've got a pretty small area behind this head, so I'm going to break the sentiment up into 3 different lines, and I always start with the middle one first. That way I get the top and the bottom centered. So I'm using some surgical tape to cover up the never and the up, and then I will take some Memento ink, and I'm using this ink because it dries quickly and I don't want anything to smear. I don't want any mistakes. So I'm going to take my surgical tape off once I get the ink on my stamp, and then I'll center it in that area that I've marked and stamp it down. I did the same thing with the other 2 words in the sentiment and got them stamped as well. And you can see when I close it that you can't see it behind the cat's head. I'm going to add a little bit of Tombow glue to the face of the kitty and position it right on top of the back part. I let my ink dry before I erased my pencil lines just because I didn't want it to smear by accident. I wanted my fishbowl to fit exactly in that right window pane, so I positioned it and then I marked it with a pencil. I'll put some Tombow glue in the middle and place it down on the card base. I want to do something so that it doesn't look like the fishbowl is floating, so I'm going to put a little bit of a tabletop, and I'm using a C4 for that, so I'm just kind of barely touching the cardstock, a light layer of the C4, and then I'll take C1 and make sure I have a straight edge at the top. So where the top of the sand is kind of my line, my guideline to go across and make it a pretty sharp line because it's supposed to be a tabletop, and I blend that out with the C1. And that is the card for today, so something a little bit different and fun. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.